This is the first Thursday of the month. That means it's question and answer, which means I have nothing prepared. So you better ask questions, and they better be something related to meditation or internal practice or something going on in your life. Don't just ask me about how to throw a front kick. I remember many times I was sitting in my Sifu's meditation classes when it was question and answer, and I started coming up with the perfect question. It's like, this is going to be the deepest, most impressive question. Everybody's going to listen to it and think, wow, that kid is so smart. I can't believe he came up with such a brilliant question. Try to take your ego out of it, which is not an easy task, but that's part of what we're here for in meditation. And just ask it in a way that is clear and concise and, genuine. So your question can be about anything, again, related to internal practice, and my answers can be anything as well. They can be something that I just came up with for the first time tonight. They could be something that I heard from my Sifu, or something that I read that somebody wrote down hundreds of years ago. We can have one of these. Nobody else is coming. There's no ghost there. So the answers that I'm going to give you, some of them may be written in stone somewhere, but that's not a guarantee. And I do promise that if you ask me again in 10 years, I will give you a much better answer. So remember your answers and your questions, and then ask me again in 10 years, and we'll see what kind of magic I come up with. So, if you guys are at home, you can ask, I see Kaya's got her hand raised already, so I'm going to go with her first. She beat you guys. If you guys are watching on Facebook or Instagram, you can type them into the comments, and I should be able to see them here. Please don't comment anything that is not a question, because that's distracting. Kaya, go ahead.
Sure. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the balance between being a beginner, but then also knowing stuff as well, and how do you kind of walk that line?
Of course. I'll talk about it in martial arts and in life. So, I love this idea of a beginner's mind. You've heard this story before where a professor comes to a Zen monk and asks, please teach me about Zen. And then he starts to go off on all the things that he already thinks that he knows about Zen. He's talking about the history of Zen, and this monk said this, and so the monk starts pouring tea for the professor, and the teacup fills up as the professor keeps talking and talking and talking until it overflows. And the professor says, stop! The cup can take no more, it's overfilled. And the monk sets down the tea kettle and says, yes, and your mind is like this teacup. It's so filled with things that it can't take anymore. So we want to be able to empty our cup whenever we come to practice. And that's kind of what meditation is all about, being able to let go of what we think we know and just be present, be open. Now, that's distinct from I'm forgetting everything and I'm either pretending or tricking myself into not knowing anything. I know what I know, and I can remember it when I need it, but I also am able to be open to learn something else. And very often what we're going to hear is going to be in opposition to something that we know or something that we think we know. So then we get into all this interesting psychological stuff where we've got this fancy phrase, and I forget what it is. Is it confirmation bias? It's something like that. It's something where confirmation bias, I think, is when we're always looking for things to confirm what we already know, and then there's something that's the opposite of that. But things that are contrary to what we know feel very scary. We don't like that as human beings. We don't like not knowing stuff. It's one of the worst things ever. It feels like a threat to us, like a physical threat, because our brains have not evolved to the point where we can really process this well. And it feels like somebody tells us something that's against what we know. We're like, certainly not, can't be. Because it's like we have to reshuffle stuff and change what we think we know, and often change what we know about ourselves. And that's very difficult to do. So a good balance is, I remember what I know, I'm open to learning other things, without just forgetting and completely shoving aside what I know. A good example of this is in martial arts. So Bruce Lee had probably the best attitude about this, the best philosophy. And Jeet Kune Do, his style of martial arts, was, we have a philosophy. It's an ancient philosophy. He studied different forms of Kung Fu, including Wing Chun, and there was a rich history and philosophy behind it. But then he also found things in other styles of martial arts that work. And he didn't see these other things that work and say, bah, forget that. That's what most people do. They don't like being faced with new stuff that is, in contrary to what they believe. But he also did not say, oh, this stuff is great, forget all the old stuff, I'm getting rid of that. He creates a blend, right? And this is what we do in our practice. So we keep what works, and what doesn't work, we let go of. And this is the right balance to have. What works, we keep. And we want to take a real, genuine look and be able to tell if something works better than what we have been doing so far or what we have thought we've known so far. And that is probably the hardest part to do, is to not instantly meet it with resistance or instantly get rid of everything that you know, right? I really am able to kind of balance and see, does this work better than I keep it? If it doesn't work better, then I let it go. That's my full answer for you tonight. Go ahead.
Sir, I have two questions.
Start with one.
First, when I meditate, I notice that I can focus normally primarily on the breath. And I say primarily because I feel the way it feels in my head is that in the front of my head, it's centered on the breath, and it's like breath with the back of my head, there's stuff kind of like almost intentionally doing it, like no, don't focus.
Let me catch up to people who can't hear you yet. So in meditation, you feel like it's like the front of your head, and it might literally be, I don't actually remember what the different parts of the brain do for the purposes of this. We'll just say that this is really what's happening. This is the prefrontal cortex, is that right? It's you're like consciously thinking about what you're trying to think about, the breath, but then running in the back of your mind is all this junk, and this part of your brain is like, don't focus, don't think about that stuff. And it's like this running commentary or running noise. It's like you've got a TV on in the background and it's really messing with you. Go ahead.
And it feels often like one of the things that pops up is, oh, my timer should go off soon to stop meditating. It's weird. Why hasn't it gone? Did I forget to set it? And then I start worrying about that because I do it in the morning when I give myself 5 minutes. And I'm trying to work up from there, but that's what we're starting with. I hear it, and I hear things where I am acknowledging that I'm going in, out when I'm breathing, but then in the back there's other stuff. It's almost happening simultaneously, which is weird because they say you can't multitask, but it feels like my head is doing it, and it's like tearing it apart slowly.
Okay. Do you want me to talk about this? Great. So, yeah, one of the persistent thoughts, and I still have this to this day sometimes. Although I've got a pretty consistent timer that I know works, but I've been through many timers that didn't work, and as soon as you get that, then your brain immediately starts thinking, did I set the timer? Am I going to be late for work? Am I going to be late for this? I should check. I've got to open my eyes just for a second, make sure the timer's going, and it's always still going, so you're like, I guess I didn't need to check. And that's because there's part of your brain that really does not want to be meditating. These thoughts that are going, your ego doesn't like it when you meditate because it can feel itself dying. Maybe kind of like being torn in half, as you put it. But it certainly can feel very often like you've got, part of your brain is running the function that you want it to run, and the other part of your brain is not. And it's like you got a computer where you got all these other programs running in the background, and then you got this thing that you're looking at, but it's running real slow, and it's like, why is it running so slow? It's because you need to turn everything off. And this is what we're trying to do with our mind in meditation, is truly let go of everything else and just be there with the breath. Now, your mind obviously works differently from a computer in that way. If you're able to consistently focus on your breath for a longer period of time, those other thoughts will disappear by themselves without you having to go over and click on that little X to turn it off. They'll just disappear. And you're right, I don't think that your mind really is simultaneously running these things, or at least you're not consciously aware of both of them at the same time. You're kind of switching quickly between them. And that's annoying and not really what we're looking for in meditation, and yet it's what meditation is most of the time, unfortunately. So what you want to be able to do is get a timer that works and know that it's working. After you've got this timer working for a couple of months, you will know when your brain starts to think, I wonder if the timer's on. You can be like, shut up, it's on. I know that it's working. And you just let go of that, right? And then with that consistency, again, in 5 minutes is absolutely great. 100% better than the vast majority of people who do 0 minutes. And then from there, as you start to add on to that time, and you get into the 10, 20 minute range, especially around 20 minutes, they say that that is where you get the most bang for your buck, the most out of your meditation. Of course, you will get more as you meditate for longer, but it's kind of a rate of diminishing returns. It's not going to continue, the benefit is not going to continue going up like that. So when you start to get to a longer meditation, you will have these longer periods of time where you really just are focused on the breath, and that will give your mind enough time to settle. You'll have that TV on the back of your head is going to start to get quieter and quieter, and those thoughts will come up less often, and eventually they'll just kind of disappear for a time. And then they'll come back up, and they'll feel like somebody turned on the volume, and you have to be like, no, I'm going to turn the volume back down. And just sitting and having your attention come back to your breath as much as possible will make that happen. You don't really need to do anything else fancy or special. Of course, there are tools you can use, like going back to counting breaths, or going back to saying to yourself thought and just labeling the thoughts and letting them go. But there's not really anything else that you have to do. You're on the right track. What you're describing is meditation. Other question? Go ahead.
I would like to ask something which is kind of opposite. I remember you told us about your perfect day a while ago.
Perfect day, yeah, that I would visualize.
Yes, and I wanted to ask you about visualization during meditation. So, could you please tell a bit more about your experience?
Visualization and meditation. It's forbidden. No. So the kind of meditation that I talk about the most is just sitting and breathing and letting other thoughts go. You could lump a visualization into the same idea as like what I was talking about with Hudson, like counting breaths, for example. That's not really meditation, but it's something that you could use to bring yourself back to a place of focus, a place of fewer thoughts. It's something that you might use to lead yourself into meditation from regular consciousness, everyday awareness. I sit down, a lot of times it can feel like this. Your brain is going 100 miles an hour. It's got all these thoughts, and then you try to sit and meditate, and it feels like you're 100 miles an hour are crashing into a wall. It's unpleasant. You sit there in all of those thoughts, and you're like, this is not meditation, this sucks. So what you could do is count breaths or do a visualization that can kind of lead you into it. And you can visualize so many different things. One of my favorite things to visualize is when I'm practicing the form. I will actually imagine seeing my partners in front of me, and that is like a moving meditation, kind of. But in sitting, you get into the perfect position, your best posture, the one that you know you're going to stay in, and then you might visualize your breath. You could visualize like a color entering your body as you breathe in, and then emptying again as you breathe out. You can imagine, light, or like feel even warmth like growing in your belly as you're breathing from your diaphragm. And that's just one of many examples that you could do. Some people like to visualize a thing in their mind and just visualizing a shape or something. That works. But we want to ultimately be able to let go of that. If you have to have the visualization, it means that you're kind of sticking yourself with a certain level of thought that you want to be able to let go of to get a little bit deeper. it's going to be very hard to fully let go and connect to your highest self and experience that like full state of oneness and experience like the universe and everything when you have a specific thing that you're trying to visualize. Even harder when you have like a story that you're trying to visualize. So I use them differently. I use the visualization to focus my mind on a specific task, or like visualizing my perfect day, to keep those things present for me so that I remember to go out and do what I need to do to make that perfect day happen. Or sometimes I'll use visualization to lead into meditation. Sometimes I'll do a qigong. I'll do like a visualization with energy work to kind of lead into the meditation, and then I let go of that. And then sometimes, and were you here last week? Is that when we did compassion meditation? Last week? So I talked about using visualization in compassion meditation as well, and that's great. Again, it's a specific kind of thing that you're doing, but you ultimately want to be able to let go of it if your goal is to completely clear your mind, which is not the goal in a compassion meditation, which again is kind of like a misnomer if we use the definition of meditation as just completely clearing the mind. Visualizing people or certain things is not quite the same thing. Make sense? Other question? You can go with your second one. Go ahead.
This kind of goes along the lines of visualization. Meditating on a certain feeling, especially if it's one of grief or dread or something unpleasant that you use as almost a form of acceptance. This is kind of, I know this is fiction, but it's kind of touched upon in Star Wars with their meditation. Like, we all know.
What do you mean Star Wars is fiction? Yeah.
But that kind of idea of embracing almost a feeling of pain or anger and kind of holding it and like sitting there and like forcing yourself to look at it and deal with it, even though it's a terrible feeling, and then eventually you have to let go. Do you think that is a good idea and works, or do you think that there's like you have advice in this game?
Yeah, absolutely. Embrace the dark side. So yes, to a point. And I think, my earlier response earlier on in my meditation practice and mindfulness practice was like, bad thought, get rid of it, don't even acknowledge it. And it was really akin to suppression. And that doesn't really work because it's always going to come back if it's something that you need to deal with. Now, if it's something that you don't need to deal with, you might be able to just let it go in the moment and then great, move on, and that's it. If it never comes back, it never comes back. But if it's something that, I'll use something that's been in my mind ever since my mom passed years ago. It's like I really think a lot more about dying. Before you know somebody very close to you who dies, it's kind of like, that'll never happen to me. And now you're like, oh, I could die any day. And I start thinking about all the stuff that I wish that I, could get done before I die. And so I heard an interview with Arnold Schwarzenegger earlier today, and it was, I think, on the Tim Ferriss show, and he was asking, he's like, let's just pretend you have 10 years left. And I was like, what kind of thing is that to say to somebody? You say you only got 10 years left and that's it? That really puts some pressure on you. And anyways, this is the kind of thing that you do want to deal with, right? You don't want these thoughts creeping up on you incessantly, especially in times where it's really not helpful. And that is most times, right? Imagine that you're driving and then that fear of death comes in and you're like, oh, what if I just did this? And you're not like, I don't want to do this, but it's kind of like when you stand over the edge and you're like, it wouldn't take much for you to just die right now. That's not what you want it to happen. So you want to deal with it. You want to be able to let it go. And again, if we say meditation, like can I meditate on a feeling? Of course, many people use this term, and they would call, and I think this is a very ancient way of using the word meditation. Some super old philosophical dissertations are called a meditation on XYZ, and it's like maybe they were just sitting there and thinking in the same. Maybe they looked exactly like we do in meditation, but instead of trying to clear the mind and let go of everything, they're holding a specific thought in their mind. And I would say, especially if you have something that keeps coming up, this is a great thing to deal with. Spend some time thinking about it. That's distinct from I let it own me, and that emotion is in charge, and I keep kind of feeding into it, and I'm acting from this negative emotion oftentimes. Because that can really start to cause problems for you and the people around you. But you set aside some time, maybe it's before. I would suggest after meditation would actually be a great time to do this, because you have kind of created this clearing in your mind. You have this blank slate to kind of set this feeling into and deal with it and decide how you want to deal with it. And sometimes it is something that you really need to just actually sit and just feel the actual sensation of what this is, right? It's anger. It's like I feel that hot feeling. I feel that tension in my body. And I kind of, explore it. Like, where does this come from? What does it really mean? Is there something that I need to do? Is there an act that I need to go out and take in order to let go of this? And a lot of people, unfortunately, their anger results in violence, and that's not what I am condoning. I'm saying I'm angry at somebody, so I need to go have a conversation with them so that I can let it go. And all of that is great, very useful. Where it becomes an issue is where we just kind of ruminate on it forever, and we are in this downward spiral and we get stuck in it. And so we want to also practice being able to let go of it. That's what meditation is. So this is one of the main distinctions between meditation and meditating on a feeling. Meditating on a feeling is I'm allowing myself to feel it for as long as it wants to hang out, and I'm thinking about the inception of that, where did it come from, I'm thinking about what I need to do and all of that stuff. And it's a little bit more conscious and methodical. Versus meditation, where a feeling pops up. And in that moment, you might be able to recognize, like, I know what this is, I don't need it right now, I can just let it go. You might recognize this is something that I need to process in this moment, and you process it and let it go. But ultimately what we're practicing in meditation is being able to recognize the thought. And usually it will be the thought first, and then that thought might quickly turn into a feeling. And that's when it's going to have some more staying power. What we want to be able to do is at least we want the ability to recognize the thought that usually leads into this emotion or into this downward spiral. And as soon as that thought comes into our mind, we recognize it, and then we're able to let it go. And this, if nothing else, will be useful in those times where I'm driving, fear of death comes, and I'm like, not helpful right now, I'm going to let it go and just focus on what I'm doing. That's the least helpful that it will be. And that is very helpful, right? But also, you're going to be in situations where you recognize that this is an emotion that's connected to something that I have actually already dealt with fully. Sometimes you will have dealt with the thing, and you're just remembering the thing that pisses you off, and you realize, I've already dealt with this. I'm done with it. I don't need this right now. Not like I'm pushing it away, it's like I can just let it go because I recognize that I already dealt with it. There's nothing more for me to do right now. There are a couple of students who are going to be testing for Green Sash soon, and they have to read Zen in the Art of Archery. They get to read Zen in the Art of Archery. There's a wonderful depiction in this book of this moment of realization. This is the explanation of Mushin, no mind. And this is the kind of experience that we will have in meditation sometimes, where the teacher, this archery teacher, this Zen archery teacher, is describing how you can finally let go of the bowstring to let the arrow fly dead straight. And it's a moment of perfect tension. And you're not holding on with tension, but you're also not letting it go too easily. In fact, you consciously are not like, let it go now. It just happens by itself, right? And he describes this as the perfectly ripened fruit falling from the tree when it's time. It's not us going over and yanking it, right? It's not a bird coming over and eating it first. It's just the fruit ripens perfectly, and when it is time, it falls from the tree. And this is what it can feel like for us to let go. This thought or this emotion has ripened perfectly, and there's no point in holding on to it. It's going to get rotten. There's no point in resisting it and trying to yank it. It just falls away from us. And you can think of it like an infant. An infant is playing with this toy over here, or the infant is holding onto your finger, and it's got a death grip on your finger. It's like nothing that you've ever felt. And you can like fight against it, or you can just give the infant a toy to play with, and it lets go of your finger like it never existed. It's not like, I don't know. Infants don't work that way. They just let it go and go play with this thing. And this is one of my favorite things about watching my little nephew, Emmy, play, is he'll be like, this thing is his whole world, and he's sitting there reading this book, and he can like literally start to repeat some of the words in the book and all this stuff, and it's so amazing to watch. And then 5 seconds later, that book is trash. It never existed. He's over here playing with this toy vacuum cleaner. And to be able to let go of something is really brilliant. And you don't want to have, this is going back to the beginner's mind question that Kaya asked. We also don't want to fully forget what we've learned. We want the beginner's mind so that we can be totally present, totally in awe, totally there and ready for whatever is there for us to get and learn. That means that we have to be able to let go of thought, emotion, all of that, and be present. And we'll never get there if we're trying to force our way out of it. We just want to allow it to ripen perfectly. So, when you're sitting to meditate tonight, recognize when you start trying to resist thought or emotion, and just kind of let it go. Recognize when you're needing to fall back on a tool of counting breath or doing a meditation or doing a visualization, and you can use that and then try to let that go and come back to it. And let these thoughts rise and fall on their own. The less we try to insert ourselves and the less we try to fight it, the more we are just like that infant moving on to this next toy. That's the way that you want to be with the next breath. That last thing doesn't exist. It's this breath right here that's your entire world. Sit. Come. Pull, eyes, spine straight, eyes upturned.